That night, I was home alone, with heavy rain and occasional thunder outside. The whole house felt wrapped in an eerie silence. My parents were away on a business trip, and I was relishing the rare solitude. Curled up on the couch with a blanket, I sipped hot tea while watching TV, enjoying the quiet evening. The sound of the rain hitting the windows felt oddly calming. The rain grew heavier, hammering against the glass as if 1,000 hands were knocking. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, trying to sink deeper into the comfort of the moment. It was just an ordinary night, I told myself, nothing to worry about. But then, out of nowhere, I heard a loud thud from upstairs. It sounded like something heavy had fallen. I froze for a second, immediately turning off the TV. The house fell into complete silence, save for the rain and occasional rumble of thunder. I tried convincing myself it was just the wind, that maybe something outside had caused the noise. After all, the house was old, and strange sounds were nothing new. But then, a few minutes later, the noise came again, louder and more distinct, like something being dragged or dropped. I sat up straight, my heart beginning to race. The sound was sporadic but clear, as if something was moving upstairs. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the flashlight and decided to go check it out. As I climbed the stairs, every step felt heavy, echoing through the house. I carefully opened each door on the second floor, shining the light into every room. Everything seemed in order. The bedrooms were empty, the study untouched. But when I reached the last door, a strange sense of unease washed over me. This door led to the attic. It was one of those pull-down types, with a rope you had to tug to lower the ladder. Normally it stayed shut, and I knew for sure it had been closed earlier. But now, it was slightly ajar. My heartbeat quickened. The attic was rarely used, filled with old furniture and forgotten items. Nobody ever went up there. I stood under the entrance, debating whether to investigate. Just as I was about to turn away, I heard it again, the faint creaking of something shifting, like wood bending under weight. This wasn't the wind. Something or someone was definitely up there. Swallowing hard, I tightened my grip on my phone and aimed the light at the attic. I decided to go up. Pulling down the ladder, it unfolded with a soft creak. As I climbed up, the air grew colder and an unsettling feeling crept over me, like I was being watched. I reached the top, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. Everything looked normal, but the sense of dread only grew stronger. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic creaking like the slow rocking of wood. I turned the flashlight toward the far corner of the attic, and there it was, an old wooden rocking chair. And sitting in it, slowly rocking back and forth, was a figure. I nearly lost my balance, my heart skipping a beat. The person sat still, facing away from me, hands resting on their knees. The chair rocked gently, the sound filling the silence. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing, but there was no mistaking it. Someone was there. "Who are you?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond, continuing to rock in the chair. The creaking grew louder, the rocking faster. Suddenly, the figure stopped and slowly turned to face me. A pale face stared back, eyes hollow, mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. Then they made a low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a garbled moan. My blood ran cold as I realized the danger I was in. The figure stood up, moving stiffly, their body jerking with each step as they started toward me. The animalistic growling grew louder. I turned and scrambled down the ladder, almost falling in my panic. Once on the ground, I slammed the attic door shut and pushed it back into place. I ran back to my bedroom, locking the door behind me, hands shaking as I dialed 911. I could hear the thumping and banging from the attic, as if the person up there was trying to break through the door. I pressed my weight against it, praying it would hold. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the sirens of the approaching police. I rushed downstairs to let them in. They quickly searched the house and went up into the attic. But when they came back down, they told me there was no one there. Only the old rocking chair, now motionless in the corner. "There's no sign of anyone," the officer said. "No forced entry either." I stood in the living room, my body still trembling from the encounter, unable to understand what had just happened. After the police left, I sat back on the couch trying to calm myself, but the image of that figure and its eerie growling haunted me. From that night on, I never felt safe being alone in the house, especially on rainy nights. I avoided the attic at all costs, refusing to open that door ever again. Something had been up there, something real. Even if I couldn't explain it, I knew it was there, waiting. It was my third week living in this apartment. Despite the heavy rain outside, I still enjoyed sitting by the window, listening to the rain. I had grown used to living alone, and while solitude sometimes felt overwhelming, the sense of freedom and independence gave me comfort. However, something about tonight felt different. The air seemed heavy with an inexplicable tension. Raindrops pelted the window with force, and the world outside appeared to be completely cut off, as if the entire city had vanished and left me as the only one remaining. Since moving to this city, my days had been a whirlwind of work, shopping, and catching up with friends. The apartment was located on the outskirts of town, far from the busy center, but it was affordable, and the surrounding area was relatively quiet. I had always thought it was the perfect place to live. Yet, over the past few days, I had started to notice strange things. Every night, as the city fell into stillness, I would hear faint footsteps in the hallway. They were never consistent, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, like someone was pacing back and forth. Tonight, the rain was particularly loud, and I had hoped it would drown out those unnerving footsteps. But around 10:30 p.m., they returned. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor coming home, but the footsteps didn't fade away. Instead, they lingered, moving up and down the hall outside my door. I put down my book and walked toward the front door, pressing my ear against the wooden surface to listen more closely. The footsteps seemed to slow down, as if whoever it was had stopped just outside my door. A sudden unease crept over me, and I hesitated for a moment before peeking through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Maybe I'm imagining things, I whispered to myself, trying to reassure myself that it was nothing. After all, this was an old building, and old floors creaked all the time. I closed the peephole and started to walk back to the couch, but then came a knock. The sound was low and deliberate, unmistakably coming from the door. My heart began to race and I froze, standing just a few feet away. Who would be knocking at this hour? I felt a sudden rush of fear, but I couldn't help myself. I looked through the peephole again. No one was there. Panic started to rise in my chest. The knock had been real. I heard it clearly, but there was no one outside. I took a step back, my eyes glued to the door, my hands trembling slightly. The knocking didn't come again, but a suffocating tension filled the air around me. I returned to the couch, trying to calm myself down, but my mind kept replaying the strange events. I picked up my phone, considering texting a friend to share what had just happened. Maybe that would help ease the anxiety. Just as I unlocked the screen, the lights in my apartment flickered once, and then everything went dark. The power had gone out. I stood still for a moment, my heart pounding in the pitch-black room. Outside, the rain continued to fall in torrents, and the wind howled, rattling the windows. I felt like I was trapped in a void, cut off from everything. No light, no sound, except for the rain and the unsettling silence inside the apartment. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A notification appeared on the screen, and it was a message from the apartment management, informing all tenants that the power had gone out due to the storm, and it might take a few hours to be restored. The message calmed me a little. It explained the outage, at least. I turned on my phone's flashlight, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. I tried to steady my breathing, convincing myself it was just a typical power outage. But then I heard it, a faint noise. Click! It was the unmistakable sound of a doorknob being gently turned. My heart nearly stopped. I shined my phone's light toward the front door, and to my horror, I saw the handle slowly moving. Someone was trying to open the door, but I was certain I had locked it earlier. Now the handle trembled slightly, as if the person outside was carefully testing it, trying not to make too much noise. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands shook as I whispered to the operator, explaining my address and the situation. I could barely get the words out, but the operator stayed calm, reassuring me that the police were on their way. "Stay inside, lock yourself in a room if possible, and don't open the door until the police arrive," she instructed. I nodded, though no one could see me, and rushed into my bedroom. I locked the door and barricaded it with a chair, my heart racing as I waited in the darkness. 10 minutes later, I heard knocking again. This time, it was the police. They identified themselves from downstairs, and after confirming their presence, I finally unlocked the door and let them in. The officers swept through the building, checking every corner. Though they didn't find anyone suspicious inside, they did discover that the window at the end of the hallway had been left open, and there were faint, muddy footprints leading from it. It seemed someone had entered through the window and disappeared into the night. The police promised to increase their patrols in the area, especially at night, to ensure the building was safe. While their reassurances brought a small sense of relief, I couldn't shake the dread that had settled deep inside me. Whoever had been outside my door that night wasn't just passing by, and as I sat in the now quiet apartment, I knew they might come back. It was a night of torrential rain, with thunder rumbling in the distance from time to time. I was alone at home, with only the soft murmur of the TV accompanying the sound of wind and rain outside. I lived in an old single-story house with both a front and a back door, but since I was usually alone, I rarely used the back door. The rain was so heavy that day, I didn't even go out, and hadn't bothered to check if the back door was locked. It was close to midnight, and I was getting ready to wash up and go to bed when I suddenly heard a faint knocking sound. I immediately stopped in my tracks. The knocking was very soft, and if it hadn't been for the late hour and the fact that the sound of the rain was so loud, I might not have noticed it at all. The knocking came from the back door, the one that almost no one ever used. I initially thought it was just the wind, blowing something against the house. After all, on a night like this, it wasn't uncommon for tree branches to tap against the windows or the wind to rattle the doors. I stood there hesitating for a moment, thinking it was probably my imagination. After all, who would come to visit on a night like this? But the knocking didn't stop. In fact, it became more urgent, as if someone was standing outside the door, waiting for me to open it. Feeling uneasy, I grabbed a flashlight and headed towards the back door. When I reached the door, I peered through the frosted glass panel. The rain distorted my view, but I could make out a blurry figure standing outside. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately called out, "Who's there?" There was no response, only the sound of rain hitting the ground, mixed with the persistent knocking on the door. I tightened my grip on the door handle, debating whether or not to open it, but uneasy thoughts kept flashing through my mind. What if there really is someone out there? And if so, why aren't they saying anything? My hand slowly loosened its grip on the handle. I decided not to take the risk. I turned and went back to the living room, trying to figure out what to do next. Just as I sat down to call the police, I heard another knock, this time from the front door. This one was louder than the knock at the back, and the rhythm was more frantic, as if something or someone was closing in on me. My entire body tensed, and my heart raced as though every sound around me had suddenly amplified. I grabbed my phone and quickly pulled up the security camera feed. To my horror, the footage showed no one outside either door. Whether it was the front or back door, the camera only showed the rain-soaked night. No shadows, no figures, nothing at all. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Maybe the cameras were malfunctioning, or perhaps something was blocking the view. Then I heard it, the front door handle gently turning, followed by a soft clicking sound. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. My hand, holding the phone, almost slipped. I held my breath, eyes fixed on the door, praying it wouldn't open. A few moments later, the handle stopped moving, and the knocking ceased. The house fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the relentless tapping of rain against the windows. I couldn't stay here any longer. I quickly dialed the police, trying to keep my voice calm as I gave them my address and explained what was happening. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, assuring me that officers would arrive soon. I sat on the couch, my hands and feet cold, every minute feeling as though it stretched on forever. Suddenly, I heard a faint creak from the wooden floor upstairs, as though something was slowly moving around up there. A chill ran down my spine. There was no one else in the house, and I hadn't been upstairs at all. The sound was too clear to be a mistake. It was as if someone was gently stepping across the floor, each step resonating with a soft, ominous thud. I stared at the stairs, frozen in place, struggling to stay calm. Maybe it was just the old house creaking in the wind, I told myself, trying to push down the rising panic. But then, the soft footsteps were followed by a loud crash, as though something heavy had fallen over and slammed into the floor. I shot up from the couch, fear taking over. With shaking hands, I reopened the camera feed for the upstairs rooms. The screen initially showed nothing but darkness, but a few seconds later, lightning flashed outside, illuminating the image. I saw a dark figure standing motionless in the doorway of my bedroom. The figure was still, not moving, staring directly at the camera. My breath hitched in my throat. There shouldn't have been anyone in the house. How did this figure get in? My mind raced as I began to slowly back away, my palms slick with sweat, my fingers trembling. I didn't know what to do. Should I hide or should I run? Just then, my phone suddenly died. The screen went black, and no matter how many times I pressed the power button, it wouldn't turn back on. The room plunged into oppressive silence, the only sound being the rhythmic patter of rain outside. I stood there, frozen in place, my ears ringing from the intense quiet. Then I heard it again. This time the footsteps upstairs were much heavier, not slow anymore, but quick and deliberate. It sounded like someone was pacing back and forth, banging into walls and stomping around as if to make their presence known. It was as if they wanted me to know, I'm coming. The footsteps stopped for a few seconds. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of creaking stairs. The figure was now coming down the steps, one slow, deliberate step at a time. Each footfall echoed in my mind like a hammer striking my nerves. My legs trembled uncontrollably. I realized then that I couldn't stay here anymore. The police hadn't arrived yet, but I couldn't wait any longer. I rushed to the front door, frantically fumbling with the lock. As I flung the door open, rain poured down, soaking me instantly. But just as I stepped outside, I made the mistake of glancing back at the stairs. In the darkness, I could see the outline of feet on the last step. I bolted into the rain. I don't know how far I ran, but I didn't stop until the rain blurred my vision, and my breath came in ragged gasps. It was only then that I realized I had left without an umbrella, rain drenching my clothes. I looked up, squinting through the downpour, and saw the glow of a police car's headlights approaching from down the street, cutting through the darkness. The officers soon arrived at my house. I hurried back to meet them at the door, practically stumbling into them in my panic. The police entered and thoroughly checked the house. They inspected both the front and back doors, along with the windows and every room. But they found nothing out of the ordinary. The ground outside was soaked from the rain, but there were no footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing to suggest anyone had been there. The officers asked if I had seen any suspicious people or cars, but all I could do was shake my head. They reassured me, suggesting it might have just been the wind or some natural phenomenon. But I knew what had happened wasn't my imagination. The knocking, the turning door handles, the figure on the camera, they were all too real to dismiss. After the police left, I tried to calm myself down, but the unease lingered. I double-checked all the locks on my doors and windows, then went to my bedroom and turned on every light, hoping that would make me feel safer. But every time lightning flashed outside, I couldn't help but picture that dark figure standing outside my door. That night, I barely slept, constantly glancing at the door, dreading that the knocking would start again. But since then, the house has remained quiet. Still, whenever it rains at night, I can't shake the eerie feeling that something or someone is still out there, waiting to knock again. That's today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.